Hey, Slick Talkers, thank you so much for tuning into this podcast. And I know that if you love this show, you'll also love my morning show called Good Morning Hospitality with my co hosts Michael Golden and Brandy Canali, as we spend 30 minutes every Monday morning to dive into the industry's top latest news and trending topics. So go check it out on wherever you find your podcasts at Good Morning Hospitality. And you can live stream with us on Monday mornings on LinkedIn, Twitter, Facebook, and of course, YouTube. Now, I hope you enjoy this episode. Hey everyone, I was hoping to get this message put together sooner, but things like this unfortunately take time to set up. I just want to say that the acts of war against Ukraine break my heart, and I know as a prior service member myself that my thoughts and prayers go out to everyone who's fighting the fight that they really shouldn't have to. That being said, we have been working behind the scenes with all of our podcasts and podcast partners to put a fund together in order to pay for any refugee housing and other needs that go alongside that, like food, water, and any clothing needs. Internally, many podcasts in the Hospitality FM network have voluntarily given up sponsorship money in order to donate to the cause and are working on a unified message in order to spread throughout all of our podcasts. So this is me calling out to all of our property manager friends, industry experts, and anyone knowing of those providing lodging for Ukrainian refugees seeking safety. You can contact me directly at will with one L, W-I-L, at slicktalkmedia.com. We have an internal document that is being updated in real time, so if anyone could share this message within your network, we'd greatly appreciate it. I'm also placing in the show notes a link to our GoFundMe and landing page for Rentals to Rescue. That's rentalstorescue.com, where we're putting funds together in order to, again, provide finances for any of these lodging and relocation needs. So thank you so much for tuning into this quick message. I hope you guys are all well and safe, as I know we have tons of listeners in Ukraine and other countries in Europe. So thank you so much for tuning in, and I hope you guys enjoy this episode.
Look, there's no right or wrong in this industry. I've learned that really quickly. But what I love about it is it's willing to change. And if this last 2 years have taught us anything, is hoteliers are eternal optimists. And I love that about them, right? So that optimism has never been tested in any worldly or thing in my lifetime that I've ever seen, right? I mean, 2008 financial crisis, 9/11, sure, shocks to the system, some of that terrorism that happened in Europe for a while. Great, slowed down hospitality, but like COVID was universal. All hoteliers were impacted in some shape or form. And the reality is we sort of leaned up a little bit, but I think we got stronger. And I think systems like Cloudbeds really was a driving factor to try to help them be future proofing. And that's something where we're about to release a lot of concepts around future proofing your property. What did we learn? The revenge of the traveler that's coming because there's this pent up demand. And how can you sort of use some of those trends to your advantage?
You're listening to Slick Talk, the hospitality podcast, a podcast for those who are in and around the hospitality industry who love, live, and breathe what they do. You can join us for candid and unscripted conversations with hospitality experts and founders as we go deeper into their personal stories while they're sharing their triumphs and trials that got them to where they are today. I'm your host, Will Slickers, and you're listening to an episode of Slick Talk, the Hospitality Podcast. Now, let's begin. Running a short-term rental business is challenging and time-consuming. Whether it's 10 units or 1,000 units, trying to keep up with the latest trends, technology, hardware, revenue management, guest support, and R&D, it's become almost impossible and increasingly more expensive for the everyday host. On top of that, all of this tedious work does not allow you to focus on what matters most, and that is your guest. Luckily, this will no longer be a problem. Introducing Journey's MOS, the newest and most advanced tech solution in hospitality. Journey's MOS provides you with a one-stop solution that will automate your entire operation and take care of all of your back office work, allowing you to fully focus on growing your business the way you want to. To learn more about MOS, visit Journey online at journey.com. That's Journey, JURNY.com. All right, everybody, welcome back to another episode of Slick Talk, the hospitality podcast. And of course, today is an amazing day because we have an amazing guest. And so I'm very excited to introduce Adam Harris, who is the CEO and co-founder of Cloudbeds. Adam, thank you so much for joining me today. And it's a pleasure to meet you.
Absolutely. Looking forward to the chat.
Of course. Well, Cloudbeds is no small name in the industry. So it's very exciting to find out your founder story and hear from the beginning of what kind of really created Cloudbeds and what you guys were driven to do. So if you want to just kind of start off, where did this whole journey begin? Were you in the industry before? Kind of tell us where this the origin was.
Absolutely. With pleasure. I'll try to make it short because it's a complicated little journey, but nevertheless, my co-founder Richard and I were sort of on the excerpts of the industry for a while. We were doing consultancy work on the technology side, working with a few hospitality brands, everything from restaurants all the way to the hotel side. And about 9 short years ago, we realized that there was this opportunity to help bridge consumers with the sort of smaller segment or these smaller roadside posadas in Brazil, which would be like a boutique hotel, or these sort of moutiques that are up and coming in the United States, which are these like motel slash boutiques, really the properties that were off the beaten path a little bit, trying to make them found. And Rich and I were doing a lot of work in Southern or sort of Latin America, and two catalyst events were taking place in Brazil,
Mm.
the Rio Games, and then the FIFA World Cup.
Mm.
And what was happening in Brazil is you had this incredible population of small independent hoteliers that weren't aware of how to connect to guests like you and I.
Yeah.
And my co-founder, Rich, was actually down in Brazil. And he's like, Adam, you don't understand. I was literally calling hoteliers, asking if they have availability. No one answered the phone. I couldn't find them online. I couldn't search for them on booking.com because booking.com didn't exist on there.
Mhm.
And then when I finally did get someone on the phone, they asked me to deposit money in a bank account, a local Brazilian bank account, to confirm
Wow.
the reservation. He's like, we got to do something about this. And so what we started off, the original sort of concept was open table for travel, right? That really simple widget that you could put on a website to book a reservation at a restaurant. Why couldn't we make that booking component easy in almost a couple steps on the hotel side?
Mhm.
This is us coming from the outside in, not really understanding that booking engines existed and were available, and other suites of technology needed to connect to the central reservation system and then ultimately down to the PMS. And so we started with this sort of meta search engine, this concept of like, let's just aggregate a bunch of properties. Let's make it really easy for consumers to book.
Mhm.
And so we had where to stay in Portuguese in .com. It was a great place to sort of build the initial brand. But then when we started surveying all these local customers, you're like, I don't have a system. I use Excel or pen and paper. And we
Wow.
said, why don't we start there? And so we pivoted really quickly. We created a SaaS product, and we started with a sort of a lightweight PMS,
Mhm.
and that grew to a channel manager, and then it grew into CRS capability, and then booking engines. And fast forward to where we are today,
Yeah.
it's really this world class PMS or world class platform that's unified about 10 out of 14 systems that are commonly used today in a hotelier. And now we're in 172 countries around the world, powering 1.5 million beds. I mean, it's no small feat,
Yeah.
but a crazy sort of acceleration took place in those years. But it really was just us as travelers trying to connect to a property owner that we thought was intriguing and a place that we would want to stay, and trying to help them out.
Well, I'm glad you didn't have to grow it and scale it by buying the destination where to stay at.com. That would have been one bigger challenge than creating what you guys have created with Cloudbeds. So,
Yeah.
wow, that's very interesting. And so, when it came to developing this, like, especially on the outside in, like you said, what was the biggest hurdle you guys had to overcome in the sense of, you know, getting the hoteliers that were using Excel or pen and paper to really adapt?
It it was probably us learning some lessons, right? You have a very, very fragmented technology landscape, even today, with the upstarts that are trying to take on some of the incumbent PMS systems and the incumbent CRS systems and channel managers and so on. you, you really had a what we sort of believed was a broken technology stack,
Yeah.
right? Too many different interconnected systems that easily could break. I'll give you a funny story because I know your history of being at a front desk and working
Yes.
for a major chain. So I was in San Francisco doing the rounds with some early investors of ours, and I was on the Embarcadero, and I had to make my way to Union Square. So if you've ever been to San Francisco, that's about a 15-minute walk. And this was at the time where we had access to hotel travel rates because of the GDS and whatnot. And so I booked a reservation on my phone and then walked the 15 minutes to the major brand and went to check in. And when I got to the front desk, the wonderful staff was like, "Well, the thing is, the reservations in the cloud, and the cloud hasn't downloaded to our desktops yet, and that will take, that happens every like 2 hours." And here we are, one of the biggest chains in the world, with what wasn't real time, what was reliance on another technology stack somewhere else in the world, with a completely different sort of technology roadmap and footprint of what their employees were ultimately working on. And I just kind of chuckled. Fast forward to today,
Yeah.
if you looked at Cloudbeds, inherently just on what we deliver to our customer is speed, right? We are here to automate as million steps. There shouldn't be a downloading of data downwards, right? It should always be in sync.
For sure.
And what was easy to overcome was providing a very, very easy to use piece of platform that ultimately seemed like your phone, right? You didn't have to spend hours and hours and hours learning the user experience. You could get up and running and be an expert in a few hours. So number one, it had to be really incredibly easy. Two, we needed to take a lot of the steps that were commonly being done in many different places and centralize them into one. So
Mm.
that was the hardest part. That was where we learned the most lessons, is like, how do you take 10 systems that are commonly used with different tabs on your desktop, or even different tabs in your browser, and consolidate them into a single step action?
Mhm.
And so our user experience team were banging their heads against the wall a little bit here. But you're like, it's not possible. This takes 7 steps in micros. How on earth do you want us to take it from 7 to 1? But over time, as we did more capability, we were able to sort of automate a lot of the task. And ultimately, what the whole vision behind Cloudbeds was two statements: more reservations and happier guests. We knew that if we could help the staff eliminate the number of times they were pounding hands on keys, staring down instead of staring at the guest,
Yeah.
that we might be able to create a little bit more memorable moment. And if that guest felt a little bit memorable, or had this like sort of craftsmanship around their experience, that personalization that they were looking for, it might lead to a better review. And there's an intrinsic connection between number of reviews, score of reviews, and the number of reservations you get. Cornell proved this back in the 90s, and then a follow-up study in the sort of middle 2000s. And ultimately what it showed is, for every point, so going from 4 to 4.1, was 1% improvement in your top line,
Oh, wow.
right? So all of that guest experience, the more we could do and drive staff towards enabling better experience, would ultimately lead to more reservations. And as placement and all these other things improve, the property would just have this infinite improvement. And that was something that we built our model on. And so number one, the lessons learned was, how do we just shift the employee away from systems? Like, let's get them interacting with you and I. My favorite story of Vegas was, I've gone to Vegas, almost 6 years in a row because of the Expedia annual conference, right?
Yep.
Every single year, Rich and I, or whoever I'm with, stays at the exact same hotel. It happens to be the Vidar.
Mm.
That's an MGM property. Every single year, we check into the pretty much the same type of room.
Yeah.
And every time I wait in a queue, the queue is about 25 to 35 minutes long.
Mm.
No reason why it needs to be like that. We can get in that later. But when I finally get up to the front desk after waiting in an exorbitant amount of time to check into a hotel room, they ask me if this is my first time ever staying at the property.
Yeah.
Right. And I'm like, awesome, good start. Like 6 years running, it's the same question being asked. Is like, how do you not have a database on who I am as a guest? How do you not anticipate some of my needs so that you can create those wowing first impressions? And I think that's a fundamental issue that's going on in travel. And I think we are making steps towards improving it, but systems break that down, right? Simplicity is what hospitality should be about. Checking someone in is not a complicated task, it should be simple,
Yeah.
right? But it also takes what we call the sort of tremendous care and discipline to do it right. And when you do it right and it's repetitive, think of how many times when you were at the front desk, you check someone into your property, you follow check-in experience, like a workflow, a checklist, probably
Yeah.
for that matter, right?
Yeah.
It becomes an SOP. And as a result of that craftsmanship of that sort of SOP, you create an experience. But technology is the sort of prohibitive factor today in our industry, and we've basically had to break all of that down. Now, for the hotelier who wanted change, it was easy. We showed them what our system was capable, and they're like, "Let's go." For those who were reluctant, they were reluctant because they were unsure of what their gain was. And so we weren't necessarily able to connect the original value proposition of now what we know.
Right.
So, today we had a management call. We were talking about some of the user behavior in our system. Every single day, about 9,000 days worth of workers are logging into our application.
Wow.
9,000 days worth of workers are logging into our application. We save 6 years of time every day for our customers. And
Yeah.
that's just 4 hours here, 4 hours there of automation steps. So what's become beautiful, it wasn't beautiful at the start. It was really the humble beginnings of let's do a little bit, let's do a little bit more. And over time, our customers were really the darlings of our innovation because they were like, you need to do this, you need to do that. And we'd put a voting system, and whatever had the most votes, we would ultimately build. And so over time, we were very, very much following what our feedback loops were saying. But then we were also trying to see this very long term platform, or what we call the unification
Mhm.
of all of these various systems. And that took a really nice balance. But it was actually an easier start than we thought it was going to be. Our first milestone was like, let's get 100 customers on it. We got a first 100 customers in a couple months.
Wow.
And then it was like, how do we go to 1,000? And we sort of ballooned into 1,000 relatively quickly. And then it was 1,000 to 10,000 and so on. But so much technology came along in each one of those various phases. And I got to be honest, the reason we're successful is not only this amazing collection of customers that we have all over the world. It's I've got 650 people who wake up every single day who are motivated and impassioned by travel. They love the stuff. And when you put them all paddling in the right direction together with the same mission, that's a lot of momentum that gets built. And so we came up with this concept early on, and I think this was also part of the reason why our technology evolved so quickly. Is if we put our employees first and we took care of them, we made them happy, we showed them that we cared, had servient leadership, we built a strong culture of community. uh, they're going to feel happy coming to work every day. And when they're happy, they're going to take care of our customer because that's their mission. That's one of their tasks. They got to build great product. They need to be great support resources. And then ultimately, if our customer's happy, then our business was going to be just fine too. But the original story, I still always wonder if we ever get back to being a consumer brand, at someone going directly to the consumer to help bring reservations to our customers, which we do in the form of channel management, but a
Yeah.
little bit more direct. But it's been so much fun seeing how the organization has evolved, seeing how much the technology has evolved, and it all came from that original concept of let's just drive more reservations and let's see if we can help take care of the guests a little bit better.
I love that. And I think SNL kind of pictured this perfectly for the outside of the industry folk that, like that Marriott skit where the guy gets stranded on an island, he gets rescued, and then they check him into a hotel, and it takes them like pretty much that 25-minute wait that you would have had at the Las Vegas
Yeah.
hotel to check in, and the front desk agent is really just pounding on keys and just not looking up. And then when they look up, they're totally missing the point in the picture of the guests and what they're needing and the anticipation of needs. And I love that you said that because from an outside perspective, coming in and now building out, get more reservations, just start that happier guests, and now fully forming a unified, product of systems or system of products, whatever you want to call them. It's really cool to kind of hear, and I think it's really even more like you also said your team, right? They're happy but I think if we all see that Marriott front desk person or whoever's checking you in like this, uh, if we see that as a traveler ourselves, the fact that you guys are going to be able to solve that problem because it's going to fix our issues as a traveler along the way is really cool. And so for you guys, where do you see the biggest like I don't know when it comes to the creation of the product, where's the biggest push been with your customers and of course a traveler obviously is realizing something different, but was it really building that booking engine? What was your guys' first initial growth?
So the first initial growth was definitely channel management. So back then it wasn't a commodity. I mean, there's many forms of channel management. You obviously have site minders and rate gains and travel clicks of the world, but then you also have, vacation rental platforms that connect to Airbnb or a PMS that connects to Expedia or booking.com. I would call that channel management, right? They are managing channels. So we bought my allocator, I want to say in like 2013 or 2014. And the reason we bought it was we really liked the team that was behind it. We also liked the segment of customers that they were profiled. So a lot of sort of smaller independents, a little bit of the youth accommodation, so like hostels or certain student housing. And our system was really well tailored for that. So we bought my allocator and instantly we were in 60 countries, right? My allocator had this really sort of good cult following. It also grounded us. It brought us closer to a customer base that really believed in my allocator. Now, my allocator was $17 a month.
Oh
It
wow.
was probably driving $1,700 worth of value for
Mm,
every one of these customers, but it was still $17 a month. And really what we recognized was if you can build this sort of hub, right? The hub, the PMS, the core,
yeah.
that's where the guest lives and also rate and availability lives and then connect that out to all the various channels. Back then, more channels was better.
Mhm.
And now less channels is a requirement or byproduct of consolidation that's happened, right? Expedia has bought a bunch of brands, booking.com has bought a bunch of brands, C Trips bought a bunch of brands, and so on, India and et cetera. A lot of consolidation has happened. So you don't need to have 20 channels anymore. You can have 7. And one of them is going to be your website, right? So over time, the commoditization of some of this tech has forced us to sort of come back around to what is the most important thing that we solve. So one is simplifying the lives of the front desk staff is critical. One, the usability, the trainability, and also just being a support network for them, building a community. So that was number one because turnover in hospitality is like 50%. So
Yeah.
every year, half your staff is out the door. Well, that makes it really incredibly hard. I mean, could you imagine Marriott with 350,000 staff members trying to train half a new population every year on a brand new system? I mean, like it would be billions of dollars of work, which is why they have stuck with the systems that they continue to stick with because they have so many SOPs and so many sort of learning, behavior and processes behind the scenes. Um, so that was number one is one, we needed to take care of the staff. We put them as a pillar. That was really, really important. Whatever we could do to shift the staff away from keys,
Yeah.
away from screens,
Yeah.
the better. The second pillar was the guest. We wanted to make it so damn easy for you to find a property, book a property, pre-arrive at a property, experience the property, and then give feedback and then leave, and then potentially come back around,
Yeah.
right? The sort of 5 or 6 steps, depending on who you ask, of the guest journey. And so a lot of our time and attention now is into that guest journey, right? Which I don't believe is perfect yet.
Yeah.
The ideal scenario for me is I get on a plane, I fly Delta. Delta knows that I'm either on time or I'm not. Did I have a bag or did I not?
Yeah.
Uber or Lyft, depending on what city it is there waiting for me after I've got off the plane. They know I have to grab a bag. And so they show up at the curb right when I'm walking to the curb. The hotel knows that I've got a bunch of bags. I had 4 delays. I'm tired. It was an overnight flight, whatever, and whatever my sort of cocktail or sort of thing to get me to reset is
Yeah.
waiting at the front desk or in my room. I don't want to be in a queue. I don't
No.
want to wait. I don't even know if I want to even experience a front desk, to be honest with you, right? Some of the beauties of Airbnb and the evolution of what vacation rental has done. Now, granted, commercial locks that hotels are required versus what a residential lock has in terms of security are very different. But let's put that to the side. I just want to be able to show up to where I'm going to basically throw my bags, crash. And if I'm going out and doing something new, I want the property to anticipate my needs.
Mhm.
So the guest journey and everything about the guest is really just data, right? And so anything we can do to enrich that data, to put algorithms around and ultimately design a stay around an individual, I
Mhm.
think is a step in the right direction. Now, granted, there's all sorts of great futuristic concepts of what hotels could ultimately become, the hybridness between a hotel and a vacation rental. But we're all heading in the right steps, and it's not going to just be overnight. Like, look, I thought the pandemic was going to accelerate the sort of digital check-in. We got plexiglass instead,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
So, like,
Yeah.
we can't make leaps and bound jumps and do it all at once. But what it did teach us is there is a propensity for the consumer to drive some trends, and the trend is the largest population of travelers in the future. Well, they were born after 79.
Yeah.
Their buying behaviors are very different than my parents buying behaviors and even how they use systems. It took me like 5 years to convince my dad it was okay to use Uber,
Yeah.
and now he does, and he's like a pro. But at the end of the day, there was a little bit slower sort of adoption. Keep in mind, the person who's graduating from high school right now, they've had an iPhone their entire life.
Mhm.
That's astonishing to me. I remember my first iPhone. I was like blown away at how amazing this device was in comparison to my little Motorola Razor, right? But like even that transition for me was such a big journey. And so what I look at is you have airline that's perfected the experience, right? You can check in on your phone. You can go through all the sort of COVID requirements that are now there. You can even, check onto the plane with the QR code that's on your phone. You can even go through TSA and all that stuff. That's a really beautiful experience.
Yes.
Um, and it's relatively quickly, but there's also some constants there, right? You're going to have to check in, you have to go through security, and you know how you have to board the plane, and your room is your room, right? Or your seat is your seat.
100%.
Well,
Yeah.
hotels have a little bit more flexibility. It's a little bit more like Tetris, and you're trying to do it, but algorithms can solve most of that. So, understanding again, going back to the data level, whatever that guest needs, I think we need to get to a place where I know that you or I, or the system knows that you or I wants a burger before we want the burger,
Yeah.
right? That's a cool little touch point that we ultimately can do. And so the third area is really the business or the data set in entirety, right? So you have that pillar one being staff, anything we can do to improve them. Pillar two, let's make that guest feel special. And then three, all of that feeds back up into the business. The business needs to have actionable data. It needs to understand what their business is representing. Are they catering towards Europeans? Are they catering towards Americans? Are they catering towards business travel or leisure? Most PMSs couldn't answer that for you right now.
Yeah.
That's a scary premise in the year 2022. So just bringing data forefront and ultimately making that actionable really changes just the dynamic of what you are or how you represent. Maybe you don't need a front desk because the guest doesn't want one.
Mhm.
Cool. Well, that's a lot of square footage in your property that you could do to monetize and do it for something else. Maybe you have to have a front desk. Maybe you need special access codes to elevators because you're part of a shared building. Again, your environment, who your guests are, all of that can translate into a different experience and ultimately wrap up. We are not a business that is trying to push you into a square peg
Yeah.
or a round hole. We are a platform that you consume. So if you want to connect to third parties, we have more integrations than any other platform in the world.
Mm.
You want to do more channels? Great, you can do that too. You want to build your own APIs? You can do that as well. We really just see this as the foundation for the hotel to wrap their ethos around our technology and let our technology just be an enabler. And that's what I think we learned really early on in our story, because we were talking to our customers so frequently.
Mm.
They were giving us these little tidbits. The other thing that we got really right was we hired from industry, but then we also hired from outside of industry. Rich has this concept of, you don't want to if you're going to reinvent the spark plug, don't just go hire 9 spark plug engineers.
Yeah.
You get one spark plug engineer because you need to understand function, but form might change. Function might change slightly too. So you get a bunch of engineers from a bunch of walks of life, but you got to have that one person who at least understands it. And so we have hotel owners, we have front desk staff,
Mm.
we have sales team leads, and we have a little bit of everything. And that's really brought this sort of injection of not only amazing depth and hospitality, but also a little bit of walks of life from other industries so that we can pull from some of the best practices.
Mhm.
Look, there's no right or wrong in this industry. I've learned that really quickly. But what I love about it is it's willing to change.
Mm.
And if this this last 2 years have taught us anything, is hoteliers are eternal optimists. And I love that about them, right? So that optimism has never been tested in any worldly or thing in my lifetime that I've ever seen, right? I mean, 2008 financial crisis, 9/11, sure, shocks to the system, some of that terrorism that happened in Europe for a while. Great, slowed down hospitality, but like COVID was universal. All hoteliers were impacted in some shape or form. And
Mhm.
the reality is we sort of leaned up a little bit, but I think we got stronger. And I think systems like Cloudbeds really was a driving factor to try to help them be future proofing. And that's something where we're about to release a lot of concepts around future proofing your property. What did we learn? The revenge of the traveler that's coming because there's this pent up demand, and how can you sort of use some of those trends to your advantage?
For sure. And man, I just gotta say there's a lot to unpack in everything you just said. Like my page of notes is incredibly long now. But just because I like to do it and add some fun to the podcast, I gotta give you a round of applause for that journey of that guest journey that you described. So very much, very much
Thank you.
like a great visionary. And so like I have a couple things I really do want to kind of like pick your brain on really quickly.
Sure.
So, talking about, you talked about Airbnb a little bit. You kind of mentioned them. For you guys, creating, more connectivity, more connections, more distribution, choosing whether, your clients can go into Airbnb, Verbo. Is that an area that you guys really see? Do you see the STR distribution, channels becoming more adapted in the hotel space?
100%. I mean, Airbnbs, we're a preferred partner. One of my colleagues is on their advisory board. We spend a lot of time in the STR, even though that's not where our systems are predominantly sort
Yeah,
of focused on. I think, oftentimes we get pigeonholed by the industry that we're just these small hotels.
yeah,
We have 1,000 room hotels using our system, resorts, multiple properties, multifamily type, installments. But at the end of the day, I think what's exciting about what's happening in vacation rentals is, because you had a non-professional hotelier or
yeah,
a host taking care of a consumer, they're like, I don't want to be hands-on. I
yeah,
want to try to automate this as much as possible. I want them to check in on their own, depending on jurisdictional rules.
yeah.
I want them to text me. I don't want them calling me. I don't want them knocking on my door. And I also want them to be able to leverage a platform for recommendations,
Mhm.
almost as self-service,
Yeah,
right? And I kind of like that about Airbnbs, which is amazing that it's a noun now and an adverb to some, and an adjective to some extent. So like what I love about that is, I just was in Big Bear. My wife and my child and I went up there for a weekend. We went to check in to an Airbnb, sent us all the instructions. We get there. It was not a two-bedroom, it was a one-bedroom. We
Oh,
needed
no.
2 bedrooms because we had a toddler, and toddler has a sleeping schedule. So that didn't work for us. So we called the owner, and he's like, "Well, that's my only property. I'm sorry, but I'll go ahead and refund you."
Mm.
So a little bit of a hiccup to start the story. I went on to one of our clients who has like 100 Airbnbs in that area, and I pinged them, and they're like, "Yes, this is the unit." Sent me the text message, had a URL, went directly to the property. It was 4 bedrooms, and she's like, "Look, I'll just give it to you for the same price that you already thing." Boom, into that. They had a centralized location, so I actually had to go to a concierge desk.
Mhm.
They owned a building in the middle of town. They had a little convenience store in the building. They had supplies and things like that. They gave me the sort of to do like where you can walk, where you can't hike, like what
Yeah.
to look for, and it was very immersive. And I was like, okay, it was a little inconvenient that I couldn't just go directly to the property,
Yeah.
but I also kind of appreciated the hotel-esque. I felt like I was properly being managed. And
Mm.
so those are polar opposites of the two, right? One's leaning a little bit more traditionally towards a hotel style accommodation. The other one's a little bit more sort of mom and pop. 85% of rooms in available listings on Airbnb are still
Yeah.
a single host driven, right? So, but we're seeing this rapid professionalization. Sonder just went public through a SPAC, Vacasa, as well.
Mm.
You're starting to see Selena come out in the near future. So you're starting to see these things that are professionalizing, evolve as grown, quite. I like that. It's still not even scratching the surface. Not even one of them, has more than 1% of that entire inventory. So together, it gives optionality to the guest, and different guests are going to want different things in different places. And
Mhm.
that's great. That's what we need. It also will force hoteliers, the big hoteliers specifically, to get away from the box. It's
Mhm.
always the same box. It
Yep.
doesn't change. Maybe it has a little bit of different shade of lipstick, but at the end of the day, it's the same experience. Like I loved my first experience staying at St. Regis.
Mm.
It's on my honeymoon, albeit I got the stomach bug on the trip, kind of ruined it. But I had the text messaging capability, and I could just text them, "Hey, I'd love Pedialyte," which was one of the beverages of choice during that trip,
Yeah.
or I need crackers, or I need soup, or whatever. But the ease of communication with the property, normally I would have had to walk down somewhere, ordered something, or picked up the phone, which I really don't like touching in a hotel for obvious reasons.
Yeah.
But and it would have been a little bit more of a ordeal. Now, if you fast forward that to an environment where I might have been on the beach with my wife, enjoying my honeymoon, I probably would have ordered more beers or
Yeah.
tacos or things that I actually wanted to consume. And so the advent of guest experience and this texting or just sort of two-way conversations, I actually saw as an upsell, like a great tool to drive more revenue for the property. I never saw it as a mechanism to increase guest satisfaction.
Mhm.
I think it simplified guest satisfaction. It meant that a single team could be on a device that they can carry around. You can't really carry a laptop around very easily.
Yeah.
It was easier to communicate back and forth. It was something that wowed the guests to some degree. And then ultimately it became transactional, right? That's exciting. We are in an industry that for the last 2 decades, even though RevPAR is like just a freaking rocket ship, GoPAR, or your gross operating, profit per available room, is actually on the decline, which means it's more expensive to actually run a business than ever in the hotel years. So despite having great top of funnel growth, the inputs to run are bogging down the profits. And so what we realized was, man, we got to get in the automation game. We got to eliminate these steps. If we could give back one staff member's worth of time every single year, what would the property do with it? And so I think COVID taught us that we can be leaner as an industry. A
Mhm.
200 room property can run on 5 people, not 15.
Mm.
in my opinion, with the right systems in place. But
Yeah.
that might mean we have to put investments like new types of door locks so that you can eliminate the front desk,
Yeah.
or a different approach to concierge, or maybe less turnaround on certain things like, do you need your sheets changed every single day? I don't know. Do you change your sheets every single day at your home?
No.
Most likely not. I don't think most Americans or even most people in the world change their sheets every single day. So, like, why did we get accustomed to changing sheets every single day in a hotel? So, a lot of the things we did on a legacy basis, I think, can be tightened up a little bit. And that will just mean saving costs. That
Yeah.
doesn't mean we have to remove experience, we shift experience. The guests are dictating. So, if we just listen, I think technology can be the driver of streamlining or even simplifying some of the needs of ultimately what hoteliers should be producing. I don't know if we know the right answer or the wrong answer, but the one thing I did learn from the pandemic was if you listen, you're going to get a lot of insight very quickly. And as a result, we have a guest experience team. They're monitoring, TripAdvisor and Google reviews, just trying to understand what properties on a collective basis were saying.
Mm.
And that information we was really feeding back into how do we build more tech? How do we build more systems? And getting that same feedback directly from the properties as well, and sort of blending what the consumer wanted as well as what the hoteliers thought they wanted, was very fascinating.
That's again so much to unpack in just a short amount of time. But it's like you talked about this, so you guys as Cloudbeds, you've consolidated, the biggest issue I think I ran into as a front desk agent, as a front desk manager, as a hotel manager in general, and even as a vacation rental manager, is that the amount of tech that you have to log into on a daily basis with the multiple amount of tabs, right? Like, it's insane. It's a lot of work. But now Cloudbed, so you guys come in and you're really building out this suite of products, right? That it's all unified. They connect. They talk to each other. It's very well synced. It's consolidated.
Yep.
You're talking about this experience, right? Like Delta knows that you have 2 bags. It knows that you're delayed. It knows all this information. It then plans the Uber to arrive once you collected your bag. They pull up. They immediately know what hotel you're supposed to go to based off of your itinerary.
Yep.
This is like, so you're talking about consolidation in the sense of what you guys have built, but what is it like? What are your thoughts on, because now that adds another layer of tech, right? I like to get Delta to talk to Uber, to get Uber to talk to Marriott, Hilton, Hyatt, whatever. Like, what does that look like in the future? Do you think Cloudbeds is going to be something that does something like that, or is there going to be another third party industry provider that comes in and really has to build that bridge?
I hope it's not another acronym. If it's 3 letters, I might kill myself, to be honest with you.
Yeah,
We got enough of them. No, I mean, jokes aside, look, I think it just tech leaders in this industry need to say, okay, am I holding us back or driving us forward?
mm,
I truly believe Cloudbeds drives this industry forward every single day for our customers, hands down. I can't say the same thing for every tech platform
for
out
sure.
there on the planet. And that's part of the reason why we're growing very quickly and others are slowly fading away. We are building programs designed to further the industry. So Cloudbits Horizon just came out. It's our education program. We teamed up with EHL. It's the number one hospitality school in the world. Our tech is now being trained to their students. So we're trying to think long term.
For
If
sure.
we start with the students who are graduating, they're eventually going to become the GMs, the managers, the owners of the next evolution of hotelier. From there, at least we know that long term, some of these concepts that we're all striving toward, it's not going to happen overnight, but it
Yeah.
can happen if we all, as an industry, come together around a table and say, what do we want to change? What do we, as travelers, we're in this industry for a reason. I'm a traveler. I've been to 57 countries. I want that Delta to Uber to Cloudbed's property experience,
Yeah.
right?
100%.
Look at Brian Chesky. He just announced that he's going to go live in Airbnbs throughout the entire course of the year. That brings him to his host. That gets him very connected to his consumer, on the B2B side. So we too are trying to drive what ultimately becomes the next stage. Now, as businesses do more, so if I go to Expedia and I book my flight, I book my housing, and I book my transportation all together. Well,
Mm,
that itinerary has a little bit of the linking,
for sure.
and that could then augment through APIs. I think what has to happen is we sort of create a digital identity of travel, and that will enable us to streamline payments, streamline what gets introduced as additional experiences, bring that data down to a DMO level so that the city is aware of what's going on so that they can learn, they can get better at how they market and reach. And so it's really going to take this sort of coordination of
Yeah.
many tech providers, right? Even the COVID passport, right? Like, there's no such thing as a COVID pass. People want the COVID pass. It's like, of course they want a COVID passport. They want to track where people are moving so they can build better, smarter systems, right? And the reality is, I think technology was really helpful in the early days of COVID because there are technology providers that could just move faster than governments. Now, I don't think the
Yeah.
technology providers or the governments necessarily got it right, but it was a step in a time which was very chaotic, right? So when I look at hospitality, take the last 2 decades. Have we made night and day changes to the technology environment that a hotelier on a average basis uses? No, the answer is not. There are 9 out of 10 properties in the world still use a cloudless PMS. 9 out of 10 properties.
Yeah.
And we're in 2022. I mean, that's insane to me.
It's rough.
So, well, we are trying to make a difference, but that also means that some of those systems that are still cloudless, they won't exist over time, and that's going to mean a sort of rapid acceleration at some point in the future, or M&A is going to come into the play where people are going to buy other people, and eventually those systems go away. Is that the right or wrong answer for the hotelier? I'm not sure. I think what's really critical is we ask the simple question: what does the guest want?
Mhm.
How is the guest shifting, and how do we solve for that? And
Yeah.
as an industry, we can begin to sort of plot some of those major changes. Like, to me, the check-in experience inside a hotel, it's flawed, but that doesn't mean it's necessarily broken for all properties. It just might need to adapt or streamline. I like efficiency. I'm happy to give information via my phone securely. I think payments inside hotels are totally broken, and we can do better. There is no upsell programs in most hoteliers' lives anywhere in the world. It's a lost opportunity. We can do better there. In just the way we communicate in general with the property. You know how many times I try to call a front desk of a hotel that I'm about to check into and get routed to some central reservation team that has little understanding of what's local?
Yeah.
That's not the experience that I'm looking for. And so AI and some other things are going to get smarter and better and faster. And we should grab them and be like, celebrate them, and hopefully that becomes a little bit momentous, and we can build from there.
For sure. Well, do you like you and I, we're travelers. We travel. We're making business trips, personal trips, whatever it may be. But do more people need to travel in order for this to really happen? Like, does there just need to be? Does this need to be something everybody like? All these travelers currently, I bet you can pitch that Uber, the Delta to Uber to the hotel idea to almost any frequent traveler or flyer, and they will be like, hell yes, sign me up today. Let's
Sure.
go. But if you take my parents, my mom hates flying. My mom hates it, but well, she will to see grandkids and do other things. But like, she's not the person that uses or travels enough to want or really say, I 100% need this experience to happen, make it happen. Does that mean like for I don't know. Do you think the current travel amount that we have throughout the world, internationally, domestically, is enough for the industry to really come together to make that kind of experience happen?
300 million people will travel for the first time in the next decade.
Mm,
I think that's enough. And they're all born after 79, and
yeah.
they're hitting their largest discretionary spend stage in their lives.
Mm,
First time travelers, let's get that first impression, and let's do it right,
yeah.
because that's representative of $500 billion worth of spend. And if every year that population just keeps getting bigger and bigger, this industry will go from a trillion and a half to 2 trillion, and so on and so on, just purely based on the fact that we have population growth around the world, we have middle class growth around the world, and people are moving away from buying cars and motorcycles and plasma screens and things like that, and they're going to experience.
Mm,
I believe that we don't have to do much to get someone hooked on travel. Travel is one of the greatest things that the world has invented. I mean, we've been traveling for over 5,000 years. The first I think recorded in experience was like 310 AD or something like that,
Oh,
where they actually have the hand, like the written ledger where someone checked in and paid for a hotel room. I
wow,
mean, we've been doing this for a long, long time. I've had amazing experiences traveling. I've had scary experiences traveling, but guess what? I talk about both of them equally with excitement
for sure.
because I think it shapes you a little bit, and immersing yourself into a culture and experiencing a different community, a different type of human being is part of the fun. And so, like the transportation side, until we can teleport to a different part of the world like that, like Star Trek, man, transportation to anywhere is going to suck. I mean, like I fly way too much, or I used to fly way too much, and I hate airlines. I'm like your mom. I'm not a good flyer. I just need to like sit there and kind of do my thing and just get off the plane as soon as possible.
Mhm.
But once I'm there, I sort of settle in. I find my groove. I'm not afraid to adventure. I eat anything. But even airline has come a long way. The
Yeah,
experience and the luxuries that are sort of afforded to us back in when we were growing up and on the little tiny seats with no entertainment, you're like, I wonder if there's a movie on the flight. Oh, wait, it's not 4 hours long and therefore there's no entertainment. Like, I remember those days. And now it's a screen with 1,000 movies and your favorite Netflix show or whatever. So we've come a long way. But I do have hope that this 300 million people are going to be a driver of just a new wave of hospitality. And I think that's what I'm most excited about is
right.
maybe we don't get to the Delta, the Uber, the hotel experience, but we do get a new type of property or a new type of sort of immersive type of lodging that is not just lodging, it's lodging and it's the and that I'm excited about because lodging is already evolving. Airbnb has already proved that, people are willing and comfortable staying
Yeah.
in an apartment like environment, even a room like environment of someone else living there at the same time,
Mhm.
right? You could remember you could rent a bedroom
Oh, yeah.
inside someone else's house. Weird, but I've done it. So
Yeah.
now I feel like we're ready. So it's that and whatever that and is, I think there's so many great ideas and there's so many cool companies trying to promote and sort of tap around what that is.
Mm.
And as long as the consumer has the willingness and the pent up desire to go travel, I think there was a major study. I can't remember what consulting firm, one of the big four, basically surveyed customers during the pandemics. Like, if you gave up sex for a year, would you do it just to go travel or eat at fine dining again? And it was like super majority would give up sex for an entire year just to go travel again or eat at fine dining, an
Wow.
experience that they couldn't be afforded during the pandemic lockdown. So, like, that's kind of funny. It's a little silly, but
Yeah.
maybe it's a hyperbolic example of what's going on. But there is a pent up demand. People want to get out there and experience the world. I'm one of them. Sounds like you're another.
Yes.
And based on all of our trend data and in our systems, it looks like it's going to be a really banner summer around the world for our hoteliers.
Awesome. I love that. And just because you kind of talked about the teleportation part, do you think metaverse is really good? Like, I don't think metaverse is gonna end travel as we know it, but I I'm curious to just randomly, like, just a random question for you. Do you think it's gonna impact us in any way or shape or form when it comes to the human interaction and experience?
Y I love Ready Player One. I love the book. I
Yeah,
thought the
yeah, yeah.
movie was fun. It wasn't perfect, but like the whole concept of metaverse, I really worry who controls the metaverse. So I would start there. It's like it depends on who controls the metaverse, right? If it's Facebook, my God, I really hope that's not the case. I just it
Yeah,
scares me a little bit. But look, I not everyone can travel, right? Some people like physically can't get out of a bed
yeah.
or can't walk, can't experience the Great Wall of China on their own 2 feet, and preventing them from being able to sort of look around and get that sense of what's happening in this sort of augmented scenario.
Mhm.
I don't want to take that away from them. But does that mean I'm never going to go back to the Louvre and look at the Mona Lisa in
Yeah.
a live environment? Absolutely not. I could do that today virtually using Louvre technology that they've already put in place and go experience, the Mona Lisa as if I'm standing 6 feet in front of it. And actually, it was a better viewing experience because there wasn't 10,000 people in the same room, right? So you'll never taste the food. You won't feel the sand. You won't feel the heat, the sweat, the smells of India if you've never been. But like all of that will never be solved for in the metaverse. At least not for a long, long time. Maybe not in maybe not in our lives. But we'll get close, right? We'll get close enough where you might be able to kind of go in there and haptically feel around and interact, and I think that's cool. Like I bought an Oculus early on,
Yeah.
and I was sort of playing around with sort of that sort of augmented reality, and it's pretty cool in some ways. Like you can evoke emotions. Like there's a rock climbing app inside the Oculus where you're like your palms get sweaty and you're like, I'm not gonna fall, but you're like feel like you're gonna fall because of the interactivity of the hardware.
Cool.
So we can get close, but I do not believe it's ever going to take away from getting out there, learning, sitting next to someone random at a bar, talking to them, learning about their cultures.
Yeah.
That's something that only you experience live.
Cool. I just wanted to make sure. I was like, you mentioned teleportation, and then I was like, oh man, the metaverse, and you got to think about all the
That's
things.
just because I don't want to fly, man. If I could not fly 15 hours to go to Australia, I'd teleport in about 2 seconds.
Amen. Amen to that. Well, this has been such a fun episode, and again, there's been so much to unpack and just go into, and it's been really great, like to get into these concepts. But one of my favorite questions to ask every guest on the show at the end is, if you had one link to send any listener that is looking through the show notes to send them to, where would you send them? And we'll make sure to obviously put everything else in there too. But where was the number one that any listener could just click and boom, they'll be where you want them.
One link to any place on the internet,
Any
anywhere?
any link you want. You can pick it.
Wow,
It could be
that's a gr
cloudbeds.com, or it could be, your LinkedIn profile, or it could be wherever your heart imagines.
oh my goodness. Ay, ay, ay. Look, I would say if you're a hotelier and you're listening, which I'm assuming the majority of you are, we are pouring a amazing amount of content into our thought leadership and our blog. We have over a dozen team members that are researching, writing just for you to learn.
Mm.
And it's not through a biased lens of like buy cloud beds, buy cloud beds, buy cloud beds. It's really to try to move this industry forward. So like just go to our blog, go check it out. It's just ripe with information from whether you're a big property or small property, a vacation rental or not. We try to make it agnostic in all cases. And then check out tomorrow. We've got some really, really cool things launching with Cloudbeds, especially in thought leadership, some silly commercials and whatnot. So yeah, send it. Go to our blog. It's a great learning piece.
I think I saw a sneak peek of a media production happening with Cloudbeds and another company. So
Yes, yeah. There's some very very silly things that we've got planned starting tomorrow.
awesome. Well, hey, I'm super excited to watch it and see it. But I just want to say again, thank you so much for being on the show and for bringing in a lot of really cool different talking points that we don't really get to discover or listen to or talk about as much as I would like. So I really appreciate it. I've enjoyed the conversation. And obviously, all the listeners, if you're listening right now, you need to check out the show notes, go check out the blog, and like and subscribe to everything Cloudbeds. And Adam will be talking again soon.
Wonderful. Thanks so much for having me.
Thank you so much for listening, and thank you to our show partners for making Slick Talk, the hospitality podcast, possible. We hope you enjoyed the show, and we would love to connect with you outside of the podcast. So you can follow us on all of our social media channels for daily hospitality content, or find us on slicktalkthepodcast.com. And don't forget to rate, review, and subscribe so you never miss an episode. I'm your host, Will Slickers, and we will see you guys all again next week. What's up, everybody? If you've gotten this far into the episode of Slick Talk, the Hospitality Podcast, then you are amazing, and thank you so much for tuning in. We want to send you two places really quickly. If you can, check out the show notes and click the hospitality.fm link. Check out all of our other shows on the podcast network. And don't forget, if you have someone that you want to hear on the podcast, then fill out the guest fill out form so that way we can get them on the show. Thank you so much for tuning in, and I hope you enjoy another episode of Slick Talk, the Hospitality Podcast.